I'd like to offer a perspective. Some of you might have heard this perspective before. Some of you, this might be brand new to you. I'll offer a perspective on who you are, who I am, who we all are. So we can break ourselves down to just two parts. One is our soul, the deepest, truest, most authentic part of us, part that is the connected to the divine. That is truly like the holiest part of ourselves. In that place, there's unconditional love and unconditional compassion and trust and just that space of awareness that just is receiving all of the information that's happening in this moment. Then the other part of us is our ego. And I use the capital E, ego. So in general English, the lowercase e ego is like, oh, I've got a big ego. I'm super awesome and like I'm amazing. And I'm not using it in that way. That way would be a subset of this capital E ego. The capital E ego is basically all of our protection mechanisms, all of our thoughts, most of our thoughts, and all of our reactions to the world, as far as ooh, I can't talk to this person, or watch out for that, or all of the trappings of our mind, all the voices that we have in our head about watch out for this or take care of that, or I have to do this because this person wants this, and like that is our ego. But our truest who we are is that space of soul. And all of our issues, if you will, reside in ego. Soul has no issues. Soul just is. It's just that space of just watching and just being aware. And while we can talk about different personality types, and we could talk about defense mechanisms, and we could talk about Myers-Briggs and all that stuff, that's great. That's all classifications of the ego. And so much of people's stuff and anger and jealousy and fear and all of that resides in the ego. The soul doesn't have any of that. The soul is just that pure space. Ego is looking for some sort of result when it's doing something. It has a plan, like I'm going to do this so that this happens outside of me. I have some sort of goal in mind. I need to figure this out, that way I can be safe. I'm going to say this, that way this person will do this. It's has an agenda. And ultimately its agenda is to make sure it's safe, because at its core, ego is not safe. Ego does not feel it's safe. Ego is built from this idea of separation. I am separate from you. My ego's name is Dave. Your ego has a name, a birth date, and all these things that have happened to you. It has a story. Soul doesn't. Soul is just that space that is pure and has a healthy, like, does not care. In the sense that soul is going to want to express itself. It's just here and I'm coming forth. If you think of an artist just in this space and here's just what's coming out of me, whether it's music or art or writing, it's just an expression. This is just coming up and out, and that's it. And it doesn't care about the response, and not in a like I don't care, you have to deal with it kind of way. In a way that a beautiful quote that I'm going to butcher and paraphrase ultimately is, a flower does not care what the plant next to it's doing. It just blooms. In that way, it's just an expression of soul. It's just, this is me coming up and out, and that's great. You might be allergic to me. Okay, I'm just coming out. It might be, you might think I'm beautiful. Great, fantastic. I'm coming out just the same. It's a deep, deep, deep knowing. It's a deep, deep, deep place. Ego is all the stuff on top of it. And a lot of our life we spend in ego. Most of us spend most of our time in ego. And a lot of the spiritual path is about trying to identify back with spirit, back with soul. And ego is our conditioning. And it's there. It's kind of, we can't get rid of it, unfortunately. It's part of, it comes with being human. So it's there from when you're born, and it disappears when you die. There are times you can sort of step aside from it or have a break from it, sometimes through mind altering drugs, sometimes through meditation, sometimes through just a raw experience of beauty. But that is, it's there. It's going to be there. So this is not about trying to eliminate ego, all right? But it's about, how do you live with it? How do you transcend it? How do you, there's a movie, one of the comic book movies that has like an element of truth to it. um, Dr. Strange has it that we don't defeat our demons. We just learn to rise above them. And really what that is saying is that we are identifying more with soul. And my ego still exists. I have an ego. If my wife is watching this at home or she comes in, she's like, yep, she sure does. Absolutely. And in some ways, like, we have to have a functioning ego in order to survive in this society, right? So I have to have an ego in order to pay my taxes, in order to understand the laws of the land, in order to run a business. There has to be that interface, right? However, when we get trapped in it, that's difficulty. So we can look at the ego as a tool for our soul to grow, right? It's a filter both in and out. It filters what we hear and what we see. It also can be in the way of how we express ourselves. An example of this is my grandmother was widowed, and when my mom was 10, I believe. And so when my mom was 15 or 16 or 17, there was a school dance, and she had lost some weight for it. She got into this dress that she really loved, and like, got her hair just right and felt like $1,000,000. And she walks out of her bedroom, and my grandmother looks at her and says, well, it's a good thing you're not an ounce heavier, otherwise you wouldn't fit into that dress, which is crushing, right? The deep feeling was one of love. That came from soul. The feeling from my grandmother was one of like, this, I love this. This is beautiful. But what came through her filter of her ego, which said, in order for you to be happy, I'm not happy because I'm still dealing with the grief of the loss of my husband. In order for you to be happy, you have to have a guy. In order for you to have a guy, you have to look beautiful. That was just my grandmother's perspective. And the initial intent, the soul-driven intent was one of love, was one of caring, but it went through her filter of her ego and came out as something mean and rude. So this happens all the time. All the time. And sometimes it's mean and rude. Sometimes it's just not exactly right. They just like, that's not exactly what I wanted to say, and just comes out of your mouth wrong. And like, wait a minute, that's not what I'm feeling. And there's an opportunity if you say, wait, that's not really in alignment with who I really am. And this practice of meditation is one of stripping away of that and coming back to that sense of awareness, that sense of soul. This is who I am really in my deepest self. So when we talk about, not engaging with our thoughts, right? That means my ego's there, but I'm not talking back to it. I've often said, you aren't your thoughts, because have you ever won an argument in your own head? Have you ever said something and your brain is like, your mind is like, oh, I get it. Thank you. You're right. And I'm probably going to just give this up now. Cool. Great. It always has something else to say back. That's your ego, because the ego is always on the defensive. You say something and your ego's like, yeah, well, what about this? And what about that? And you could be wrong about this, and watch out for this, and watch out for that. That's all ego. So when we sit in meditation, your ego's still going to go, because it's going all the time, just like your body is going all the time. But what happens is that we stop to identify with it. We stop responding to it. And in that moment of not responding to it, we are identifying in that place of just awareness, which is our soul, which is our deepest place. Now, we may not have a grand epiphany of undying compassion and love when we're sitting in meditation. That doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. This is a practice of separating out. This is a conditioning that we have to over-identify with our ego and over-identify with those thoughts and talk back and get lost in there. When we sit in meditation, we take a break from that. And we say, hey, I see you going. I see all the thoughts and the worries and the plans, and don't forget to pick this up, and don't forget to do that. And oh my goodness, how long has this been? That's all the ego. Soul is just sitting there watching it all, and occasionally has something to say that it wants to just come up and out. So I could probably talk on hours for this, because there's a whole lot of consequences from this perspective. But I'll let you sit with that and consider where in your life you see ego and where in your life you see spirit. So, for example, if you just consider in the last couple of weeks a moment where there was just like an awe of life, whether it was you're in love with somebody, or you just saw a beautiful sunset, or you're just like, this snow is just beautiful. And there isn't any thoughts going on. You're just experiencing that moment, or a beautiful piece of music or something like that. And you're just there. There's no thoughts. You're just experiencing it. That's soul. But as soon as you start to analyze it and plan, I have to do this, so this is going to happen later, and that, if I do this, if I ask this person out now, then we can go to the dance on Friday. If we go to the dance on Friday, then we'll be married by next June. If we can be married next June, we'll have a kid in 3 years. That is all ego. All of that planning. So I'm just going to invite you just to try this perspective on. If it doesn't work for you, great, let it go. But I'll invite you to consider where in yourself that you can connect more with that soul. It's not about eliminating the ego. The ego is not bad or wrong. It has a job. It has a wisdom to it. But we can learn that we don't have to identify with it, because it's a little short-sighted. So thank you so much for stepping in tonight, for attempting to reconnect with your soul, whether you were aware consciously that's what you were doing or not. And have yourself a lovely night.